Hello and welcome to Truth Talks. My name is Lisa Lee, and I will be sharing on one of my favorite topics today, which is emergence. We have been exploring an 8-part series entitled 8 Pillars of the Light, which really can be looked at as one symphony with 8 beautiful movements to it, really bringing us into the awareness of how our particular lights illuminate the world exactly when and where they are most needed. Each of these pillars really are portals to the divine in their own right, but together they really create a spiritual journey leading up to today's pillar, which is emergence. Now, I love thinking of emergence as just pure creativity. With our conscious participation in it, it really exponentially moves it forward to the next level. And that's really what the universe is pulling us into right now. So to begin with, I want to share an experience I had back in 2002, which I would consider a defining moment. And maybe you have had these types of moments also, where you're going down a particular path in life and all of a sudden something occurs. It's like the universe says, okay, we're now going to take a sharp left. And so I had one of these experiences at Renaissance Unity in Michigan back in 2002. We had a guest speaker by the name of Carolyn Meese. Some of you may know her. She's a very beautiful, medical, intuitive, and deeply spiritual person. So she came to do a workshop there, and she spoke for 3 hours and with no potty breaks. And it felt like 5 minutes. It was absolutely riveting for me to listen to her. And she said something that has always stayed with me ever since. And she said, what if the universe wants to give you a powerful download, something never seen before anywhere on the planet? And that just really captured me because I wanted to really be the kind of person that could receive this type of a download. But I had to ask myself, how do I need to be personally to receive such a download? And then how would I then live it in the world? Because obviously, if it's never been seen before, this is something that would really transcend my capacities to perceive. So this would really require something special that I didn't really think that I had at the time, but really was so curious about it and really wanted to find out how I could. I also remember listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson speak, and he was saying that there might be this entirely new or different evolutionary life strain that is here on the planet that we just can't even see, just because we don't have the perceptual capacities to it. It kind of really boggles the mind, doesn't it? So when we think of emergence, of bringing forth the new, it really takes it to the next level, doesn't it? That we want to be awakened. We want to be co-creative in this process. And clearly we recognize that what we're being invited into is beyond what we can currently think and believe. So I really think it's kind of a big ask, wouldn't you say, of the universe? But then isn't that really what the earth is now calling us into? Well, this is what the world is wanting. Isn't there the sense that we really have gone as far as we can go with what we currently know? And so there's this pull for us, those that are here as light workers, to learn how to step beyond these boundaries that we call perception. And just think about, what if we could do that? We could really consciously move into this place of a whole new earth. Earth would just move to an entirely different level of consciousness. So this is what we're going to be talking about today in terms of emergence. But first, I want to take us down a trip down memory lane, so to speak, so that we can have an opportunity to remember each of these pillars that we have been exploring so far and see how they really speak to each other and see how they speak specifically to emergence. So believe it or not, it all begins with love. And so the first 4 pillars really speak to this ground of being, our solid foundation in divine love, which is what makes it possible for us to take on this great task of the new earth. And reminds me, I used to play this divination called the I Ching. Some of you may have heard of that. It's a Chinese divination tool. And in reading the descriptions, there was this term that was called crossing the great water. And what that basically meant is taking on a large task in life or a big challenge of some sort. And there was always this sense of when it was appropriate to cross the big water and when it was not. And when it was is when you have all the inner resources that are needed to do this. And so very often we think of giving, but we don't realize that true giving comes from an overflowing cup. Your own cup being so filled with love, so filled with the divine that it is overflowing, and it is this overflow that really blesses others. And we're usually taught to really be very self-sacrificing. But if you're going to be taking on a great task, you need to make sure first that you're filled, totally filled up with love. And so the first pillar is the pillar of belonging. I love this pillar. There's a beautiful woman by the name of Susan Harper that says, "The earth is a lap of belonging." And that's such a beautiful image because it's the idea that everywhere you step affirms that you belong here. You were called here at this time. Your light is needed in a very particular way. And it also speaks to the fact that we are just not replaceable. Our lights are irreplaceable here. That the universe does not have a backup plan for us. It has put all of its eggs in our basket, so to speak. And so it's understanding the preciousness of who you are. And also realizing that there's something going on the planet right now, what we call a convergence, where there are many people with a high vibration that are being drawn together in community and for a very specific purpose. And so being aware of, how this is happening in your community, wherever you are, and, in our community. And so the affirmation that we have for the pillar of belonging is this: I am the sacred convergence of love in ecstatic expression. And so I just invite you just to breathe this in, to say this to yourself, and just feel yourself totally belonging here. I am the sacred convergence of love in ecstatic expression. And so the second pillar is the pillar of self-love. And this is the invitation just to love all parts of ourselves, because we're really miraculously both human and divine. And there aren't any parts of ourselves that are worse than others. All of them need to be here to speak to each other. There actually is a positive role for the ego. Most of us are not aware of that. It can't be in charge. But all parts of who we are part of this miraculous creation that is called a human being. And part of this process is being able to really allow love just to permeate your entire being. And that's part of this total filling up to being overflowing. So our self-love affirmation is, I am divine humanity and human divinity in sacred partnership. So I invite you once again just to breathe this in, say it to yourself, and really feel yourself loving every part of you. I am divine humanity and human divinity in sacred partnership. So our third pillar is the pillar of grace. And this is just divine magic. I love this one. And this is where love gets to break the rules. We don't realize that, but love gets to break the rules of karma on your behalf. And we're not really bound by our human frailty, and the world is not bound by its shadow. There's something that is more powerful that is at work here, even more powerful than the laws of nature. And so we're just going to evoke this beautiful divine magic to be alive in and through us with the affirmation of my life is an expression of everyday divine magic. And so once again, just close your eyes and breathe this in and just feel this magic filling your being as you say to yourself, my life is an expression of everyday divine magic. And so our next pillar is the pillar of surrender. And so this pillar is in its perfect place because you're so filled with this awareness of the love of divine. Why would you not want to surrender all that you are to that? So I want to point out also that surrender is not giving up. Giving up is a decision to remain asleep. It is a turning away. But surrender is a deep trusting in the divine to the point where you give your total body, mind, and spirit to this promise of unconditional love that you feel flowing in your being and how it wishes to show up in and through you in every moment. It's actually a position of being fully empowered. It is not a position of weakness at all. And this is where you can really become a direct channel of the divine flowing in and through you. So our surrender affirmation is my surrendered heart takes rest in love's promise. So I invite you once again to close your eyes and just breathe in this letting go and this total rest in the divine as you say to yourself, my surrendered heart takes rest in love's promise. And so continue breathing in. Before we go into the next pillars, just imagine your whole being filled to overflowing and feeling this self-love, feeling this belonging, feeling yourself surrendering to the divine in this love. So the next three pillars are how we turned our minds and our hearts to be in service to the world. And so the first pillar in this category is a pillar of synergy. And so this is about embracing the other. And it really also speaks to the fact that we really have gone as far as we can alone. And we have already kind of played with the ideas of coming together in similarity. But this is really embracing the difference because in terms of the universe, synergy really occurs where you have two diverse elements that come together and then produce something, the third element that was never seen before and doesn't even resemble the two parent elements. It's, in fact, the greater the diversity in these elements, the greater the leap forward in evolution. And so there's an invitation now for us to really embrace the other. There's such polarity going on in the world right now that we can really feel the potency of this particular invitation and to not really turn away from difference, but to lean in and to know that there's something marvelous that's about to happen. And so our synergy affirmation is, I find my true heart within the heart of the other. So just breathe this in, this beautiful dynamic energy of the coming together of opposites and diversity. And just allow it to wash over you as you say to yourself, I find my true heart within the heart of the other. So the next pillar is the pillar of possibility. And many of you may have heard me say this phrase before, authoring the impossible, which is actually from Jeffrey Kripal, who is a religious historian. And it's really the idea that we have this ability to bring something amazing into manifestation. And very often our mind tells us what's possible and what's not possible. But so often what we're called to bring in is something that looks totally impossible initially. But through our faith and through our vision, we have the ability to really bring this into being. There's a saying that I really like that says, the possible will do right away. The impossible will take us a little bit longer. And we really see that possibility really doesn't want to have a lid. It wants to be fluid, and it wants us to be open and to receive something that we've never seen before. So our possibility affirmation is, as love's emergence, I am an author of the impossible. So just take that in and take this expansive view of possibility into your very being. As you say to yourself, as love's emergence, I am an author of the impossible. And so our next pillar is the pillar of divine purpose. And your purpose is really this beautiful sweet spot where the deep desires of your heart meet the hunger of the world. And so often, again, we think that we need to sacrifice ourselves in order to really be in service to others. But there's something about that potency of the desires of your heart that is really needed in terms of meeting the world where it is. And it's even helpful to really think about the world as craving what you have to offer, which is really accurate. And really even seeing the world as craving what you have to offer to the point where you were drawn here to give it. And again, this brings up the idea that you are just completely irreplaceable. And there is no backup plan for what you have to offer the world. And so our affirmation for divine purpose is, my soul light illumines an awakened world. So breathe this in and feel that beautiful potency, that sweet spot between where your desire meets the craving of the world. As you say to yourself, my soul light illumines an awakening world. So I invite you to just continue to breathe now inside of these synergistic relationships, this potency of diversity. Breathe in, holding this vision of possibility beyond imagination. And breathe in the desires of your heart, meeting the world exactly where it is needed. And that brings us now to the Pillar of Emergence. And a good way to think about emergence, as I had mentioned before, is that emergence is just pure creativity. And we have just reached a stage of development now where we are really being invited by the universe to be totally participatory in this process, to be totally awake. And it is really that element that will move us to the next level. And so I want to speak about emergence in a particular way. And there's this beautiful Armenian philosopher called George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. Some of you may have heard of him. There's so much I could say about him. He is a philosopher, a mystic, a spiritual teacher, lived between 1866 and 1949. And he spoke of this pure creation in terms of the law of three. Now, three, as we know, is a very magnificent number. There's the Trinity in Christianity. There's mind, body, and spirit. There's something special about the relationships in the Enneagram with the number three. and just the patterns go on and on. But the law of three, we'll be speaking about today specifically, is with the law of creation. Creation of human life. The law states that for anything to be created or an event to materialize, three forces must be present: an affirming force, a denying force, and then a reconciling force. All three must be present and are equally important for the phenomenon to arise. So before we go further, I want to just talk about the fact of energy itself. And I want to know if you have ever heard of this term that everything is energy. And if you have heard of that term, I want you to pretend that you're hearing it now for the first time. And the reason I'm inviting you in that particular way is very often we hear these terms and they become, like a concept or something, that we think about or we put outside of ourselves and not realize that something like this, everything is energy, speaks to how we are living. It speaks to what's happening inside of us. It speaks to the dynamic of the universe and how we are a part of it, both consciously and unconsciously. And so as I'm speaking about these three forces, I want you to think about them in this way. There's this beautiful word called animism that was a type of a philosophy and a way of thinking, and a worldview, in fact, which predated Christianity. And it's the idea that everything is alive. Everything, in fact, is sentient, which means it has its own wisdom. There's wisdom permeating in everything, even the things that we would normally call inanimate. And so I'm inviting you, as we're talking about these three forces, just to bring that idea of life there and to see it as not something that's outside of you, but something that is very much a part of your being. So the law of three, there are three forces: the affirming force, the denying force, and the reconciling force. So the affirming force is an intention that is placed into the world. It's a divine idea that's ready to find its way into manifestation. Whether you want to write a book or take a trip to a foreign country, all of the cosmic energies converge around that idea, ready for it to manifest. That's the affirming force. So the denying force is something that appears as a challenge or even a block to this expression. So some of you may have had that type of experience where you've gone to take a step to do something and then something seems to get in the way or it seems to make it more difficult. So the mind would say about this that the ideal would be for this expression, this affirming force, to proceed without any hindrances. That's what our mind would say. Or we engage in what we call metaphysical malpractice, which means that you look at it and you say, oh, well, there must be something really bad in my consciousness that has brought this to being. Otherwise, it would be totally smooth sailing. But really, both forces are needed for creation. Mostly this happens unconsciously, like walking is an example of these two forces. You can say that if you want to walk across the room, taking a step is a kind of affirming force. But walking itself, it really is a controlled fall. You may have heard of that, which means that whenever you take a step, you're already engaging falling at the same time, which would be the denying force in terms of your decision to walk across the room. But we don't even think about that because, we're just consciously thinking about other things. But these forces are always alive and always working with us. So the reconciling force occurs as the result of the synergy. This is back to synergy again, between the affirming force and the denying force. So in case of walking, for example, the reconciling force would be taking another step, which resolves the idea of falling. And it also becomes the affirming force for the next step forward. But what happens if we begin to raise the stakes? And now what if we want to do something that has never been seen before? So that really brings to mind that we need to bring our conscious attention and our conscious awareness to the reconciling force. So to bring your conscious awareness to the reconciling force requires two things. So first, you must actually step outside of three-dimensional thinking. And what that means, it sounds like a lot, but what that means really is that you can't think in terms of good, bad, right, wrong. You can't think about the affirming force is good and the denying force is bad. You need to be able to stay in this place of equanimity and to really be in the heat of that. And there is a heat that happens between the affirming force and the denying force. But you will be in this place where you can really hold this larger picture that really can embrace both of those so that something can come forward that has never been seen before. This is really how we overcome the limits of our own perception. Just like with hydrogen and oxygen that produce water. There is no way that you could predict from either of those two elements that water is even possible. But as we begin to work with these forces consciously, we begin to over and over again transcend our own perception and begin to manifest a whole new earth. So with emergence, I would like us to take a look at the affirmation, which is, I am love, ever birthing itself anew. And I invite you again just to breathe that in and feel the dynamic participation of your consciousness in emergence as we create a new world together. I am love, ever birthing itself anew. And so I would like to leave you now with an excerpt from our special reading on emergence. And it begins with a beautiful quote by Alana Fairchild. And then the second part is an affirmation. And so I invite you now just to close your eyes and allow these words to wash in and through you. Alana Fairchild says, I have the perfect gift for you. It's a gown of new colors. The new colors of this gown will make your eyes sparkle and gleam as though they were the most precious of gems, and your skin luminous as if lit from within. Your entire being will be complemented by this gown. So hold on no longer to the shabby, tattered cloak, so unworthy of you. Let me grace your shoulders now with this royal robe instead, that you may shine beautifully, as it befits a royal child of divine parentage. Today I offer divine emergence, all that I am, both the passions of my human-heartedness and my largeness of self, ever expanding into limitless possibilities. Through love's courage, I befriend the conversation between doubt and vision that emergence requires, and I live in the balance between surrender and action that trusting in the divine engenders. Clothed in my gown of new colors, I behold a world ever expressing its next highest evolution of love, a myriad of miracles never seen before. And this is the way it really is. Thank you so much for sharing this with me today.